Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge, and today we have Inhumans. This is from Marvel. It's a Marvel TV series that lasted one season, uh, barely, was it 10 episodes? 8 episodes. It was 8 episodes. Something tells me it was longer than that, but I don't know. It's just 8 episodes. They're about 44 minutes each, and I only watched one episode because I've already seen this series when it aired, originally on ABC back in 2017. Yeah, that's 2000. It's 5 years old, and it premiered. It had the distinction of premiering not just on television, but on IMAX screens in theaters for like a day or something like that. It was like a special event kind of thing, just to sort of kick it off. This is the time when the TV arm of the Marvel Studios brand, was not under Kevin Feige. It was under a whole different set of people, Jeff Loeb and a few other people that handle all the TV stuff. They farmed it out, farmed out. I hate to say that, but that's how a lot of the characters we know, like Daredevil, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, The Defenders, all ended up on Netflix, and we also had stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC, and Cloak and Dagger on Freeform, and all these other things everywhere else. Runaways on Hulu. So everything was all over the place, and in Humans, they came in at a point when Disney did not own 20th Century Fox yet, and they really wanted to make use of the X-Men in their own way, but they didn't have 20th Century Fox, who owned the rights to make anything X-Men television or film. And at the time also, Marvel was doing, 20th Century Fox was doing, I can't even remember the name of it. It's not Generation X, because that was a special that was from the 80s or 90s, I've already forgotten. There was also Factor X, not X Factor, but yeah, Mutant X. Mutant X was a thing that existed. If you can find that, that's a kind of a lost hit. But anyway, the point is that Marvel could not use the X-Men, so they wanted to create an X-Men. They wanted to elevate an existing team that is like the X-Men to its roster, but on television. And this is also happening in the comics as well, because at the time, Marvel was still publishing X-Men comics and things like that. That was not a problem. But they were all crossing over with the Avengers, but they weren't meeting each other as much. It was sort of like, you kind of got the feeling they were repressing any kind of big deal X-Men stuff in the comics for a while, just sort of letting them off in their own little corner of the universe in the comics, in order to let things they had control of, Avengers, and not Spider-Man, but to a degree Spider-Man eventually. They didn't have control over a lot of that other stuff with the mutants in other brands. So they kind of, I guess they wanted devalue it to a degree. I don't really know. I realize I'm probably just rambling at this point. This is all speculation. It's people have written articles out the wazoo for years about what they were planning and intending to do with the X-Men, or hoping to do the X-Men. But in a sense, the Marvel Comics elevated the Inhumans, which had been around since 1965. They first appeared in Fantastic Four 45. So yeah, they're not a new team or a new bunch of heroes by any means. They were just sort of expanding them. In the comics, there was an issue where there was a point where the Terrigen mists, which creates Inhumans in a sense, gives them powers, makes them from just these race of people into people. It gives them their abilities, and you don't know what it is. It's a total crapshoot. But you reach a certain age, and you walk into the chamber, and the Terrigen mists give you a random power. Luck of the draw, depending on who you are. This is similar to X-Men in the sense that X-Men, you are born with your abilities, but you usually don't get them until puberty, and who knows what you're going to get or when you're going to get them. It might come early, it might come late, doesn't know. You don't know. This is how in the comics they made Ms. Marvel. Ms. Marvel got, there was a point where the Terrigen Mists, well, the Inhumans existed on the moon for a while. They existed in the mountains somewhere in another part of on Earth at some point, and at some point they eventually ended up in the bay right off the edge of Manhattan, and something happened where the Terrigen Mists escaped and started spreading all over the world, and different people got infected, and those who got infected with the Terrigen Mists were people who already had Inhuman DNA in them, and one of them was Kamala Khan, who created Ms. Marvel. Now, in an inversion of all of that, we know that from watching the Disney Plus original series of Ms. Marvel, she is the first person to be stated as being, to our ears, to the viewers, as a mutant. So, that is, it very much says, you know what? Had we not had struggles with X-Men, owning the X-Men rights before, well, we're sort of taking that back, and we're claiming that Kamala is not necessarily an Inhuman in the MCU. She is a mutant. So that's a lot of exposition to tell you that this show exists. And by the way, that's what the whole first episode is. It is like, it feels like 75% exposition, which is understandable. Most people have no idea who these characters are. Most people have these characters have no real connection to the MCU characters that we know. And to a certain degree also, they can't really make those connections as in a production sense. They can't say, oh yeah, that guy's the cousin of Captain America, or that guy was best friends with Gorgon, or that guy dated, one of the Fantastic Four, Johnny Storm, once dated Crystal. These are all characters. If you haven't heard of the Inhumans, you have no idea who I'm talking about when I talk about these characters. So yeah, it's a bit of a jump. I mean, even people who don't know the X-Men necessarily, they know Wolverine. Maybe Cyclops. Maybe Gambit or something. Storm. Things like that. But they knew them because of the movies that were made previously. We're talking about the normies. We're talking about the people who exist outside the nerd world that I am entrenched in. They don't... When you have somebody like Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine, and the movie's a big hit, and it has its flaws, but it's great. You have something foundational for people. If they suddenly made an X-Men TV series, people would be like, "I'm watching that because I like the X-Men." Who knows who those half the characters are? They might be introducing new ones. I'll watch it. This one, not so much. I don't think a whole lot of people really watched it, and it was a bit of a thing to get over because these Inhumans, they technically aren't reflected as people like you and me. They're people who live on the moon. They're a royal family. At least the main characters all belong to a royal family, and you don't really get to see them use their powers until toward the end of the episode, the first episode. And by the way, the first and second episode, I think, were the pieces that were introduced in the theaters. So I didn't watch the second half, even though I've seen it 5 years ago. But there you go. I'm going to spoil a few things for you, just a little bit. If you care, you can stop watching now, obviously. But this is a spoiler right here. One of the problems with this show is that they don't know what to do with the characters, especially with the budget they have. So you get a character like Triton, who is a fish man. Everybody has a fish man on their team. Aquaman, Namor, stuff like that. Namor. He's, in this case, Triton is a fish guy. And they're like, oh, people who live on the moon, fish guy, what are we going to do with him? It's the whole Aquaman he gets monitor duty for the Justice League. Because they're like, oh, we got a big thing going on in the middle of Kansas, and there's a big battle going on with giant robots. What can the fishman do in the place where there's no ocean? No, he gets monitor duty. So in this case, rather than have him be the guy who puts on a ton of makeup, he's green, and they give him the first 5 minutes where they shoot in these, because it's IMAX, and they shoot in the machine guns, but it's all fetishy. It's like really slow motion bullets and casings flying in the jungle as they're hunting a young girl who happens to have weird eyes, and Triton saves her, but not before he jumps off a cliff into the ocean, but shot before he jumps off, killing him. So they kill off one of the main Inhumans right off the bat. Now, those of you who have seen the show already, you know that he didn't die, but it keeps him out of the series for a good chunk of it, in order for them to go, oh look, heroic return, and he has, because they're near water in this scene, and whatever. What we also have a situation when I point to her is the fact that she's Medusa. Her power is her hair. She has the ability to manipulate her hair like tendrils and tentacles and everything else, and she's literally, I know it sounds kind of jokey and kind of silly, she is one of the most powerful beings because of that. She can extend her hair and everything else, but for the most of the first episode, you just see her wearing an awful red wig. It's like she chose that color at the salon, and it was just like, oh, we made a mistake, and we're just going to live with it until it washes out. No. In this case, though, in order to save money on the budget, well, after they get her to do some things with her hair a little bit, again, expensive CGI work, one of the cruelest cuts, literally, from Maximus, who was our de facto bad guy, as he has been with the Inhumans, the brother of King Black Bolt. He's Maximus the Mad in the comics. In this, he's played by the guy who plays in Game of Thrones. Gosh, why can't I say his name? I'm going to get his name up here. Iwan Rand. But he plays Ramsay Bolton. And he's a sick, twisted guy in Game of Thrones. Here, he's not so much, but you kind of, if you've seen Game of Thrones, he's got that kind of, he's carrying the baggage of the character into this new one. But he's also playing a bad guy in this, technically. He's a guy who seems to have noble reasons for doing what he's doing, but he goes about it in a rather, you're doing it my way, or I kill you, or imprison you. Or, in this case, when it comes to Medusa, cuts off all of her hair. Now, this have them from having to digitally have her use her hair in every situation to get her out of it. That makes sense. You saved a ton of money there, so you spend the next 7 episodes not having, by having a character with no powers. A main character, like kind of the lead character with no powers, other than Black Bolt, who's played by Anson Mount. You might recognize him from Star Trek Strange New Worlds and Discovery, which he first appeared in as Captain Pike, where he is full of charisma. Here, he's restrained, because Black Bolt, if you don't know, can't speak. He can. Oh, he can absolutely speak. But you shouldn't, because it's destructive. If you saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, you know that Doctor Strange meets him. Anson Mount revisits that role and does not last long up against the Scarlet Witch. That was the same guy. Again, if you were wondering, if you saw Doctor Strange, you'd never seen the Inhumans, well, that guy is in this. But he lasts all 8 episodes, so he doesn't die. But because he is super powerful. His voice is his power. He can literally just destroy mountains by speaking aloud. It's a devastating power. And of course, as we end this episode, everybody ends up, in the first episode, everybody ends up teleported to Earth, away from their moon base, their moon city, Adeline. I always called it Tillin, but it's Adeline. So they end up on Earth trying to get back their city, working together or working separately, teaming up with different people, humans, and trying to take back what they once ruled, but in the realm of humans. So the budget is less now because you're also shooting in Los Angeles at this point because it's local, so everybody gets to go home each night. Yeah, so you get all that, and oh yeah, then there's Lockjaw, the teleporting giant bulldog. Yeah, he's gigantic. He stands at least a good 5 feet high, and he's just burly. He's adorable. He has ability to teleport himself and others, and he's very intelligent. But they treat him like he's a pet, but he's also inhuman. So I don't know. I don't. It was always been a gray area. Is he a human who got turned into a teleporting dog, or is he a dog that just got hit with a Terrigen mist and changed and got abilities? I don't know. Either way, they get rid of him pretty quickly as well. They sort of they incapacitate him, and you don't see him because he's very convenient in moving people around. They incapacitate him, so you don't have to see Digital Dog for 90% of the show. He shows up here and there, rarely, but it's a very short effect. Like, hey, Lockjaw, thanks for dropping me off, and it's that kind of thing. But they send him away. He got incapacitated, or he gets sent away, so he cannot get harmed or in trouble or something. I don't know what it is. I forget, but it's Fishman, Hair Girl, and Teleporting Dog. 3 biggest budget things taken right off the table, right there. There's a guy with hooves, that's Gorgon, and there's a guy with tattoos on his face who can plan out his entire. He's a Karnak, played by Ken Lung, you might know from Lost. Always a funny guy. In this case, he's very stoic and logical, but also funny. But he was in Lost. So and tons of other things too. When I go just by when I say, oh, he was in Lost, it's just the thing I recognize him most from. So. And it's ABC, so ABC tends to reuse a lot of the same actors that they have in their, corral, I guess. So anyway, we get a bad guy out of Maximus who decides to take down the family. He gets all kind of creepy on Medusa, and he's basically, when he gets rejected, he decides to cut her hair off. So yeah, that's, to me, technically, while that is... It's logical from a bad guy's point of view, and it is cruel, beyond cruel. It's like, for her, it's like cutting off her limbs. For any of us, if this guy said, "Oh yeah, you know what, you're a really great, hey, Karate Kid, you are such a great fighter, but I don't want to fight you. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut off your arms and legs." Yeah, that's the extent. If he decided to cut off the Karate Kid's arms and legs, that's what he did to Medusa by cutting off her hair. It's cruel, but it shows she can overcome adversity, and she's not just her hair. She's just not Hair Girl, and she's powerful on her own, which is great. But yeah, I know I've talked way too much about just the first episode, and told you way too much about later episodes and how this resolves. But yeah, I can see there's a lot of stuff. I can see a lot of people didn't like it because, one, it's unfamiliar to a lot of people, and it just didn't. You just didn't have the emotional investment you might have had with somebody who is more, for people who are characters who are more grounded, and that's what the story tries to make them become over the course of the series, where they have to integrate themselves with the human world to make them more human. But by the time you get to the 8th episode, you see them resolving their battle, and it's again, love Anson Mount. I think it's a great cast. It's just, I don't think it was well thought out, and it didn't have a future. It really, they would have to be a whole lot more dynamic. You can't throw royalty into the MCU without making them feel a bit more human. Crystal, the girl who plays Crystal, which is Isabel Cornish, she is probably the most relatable character in regards to us, because she's a teenager, or a young adult anyway, who just is irresponsible. She's late. She kind of listens to music. She relaxes. She seems like somebody who people could connect with. and she is one of the main heroes in this. But I don't know. It's just I think if these characters are ever reintroduced, it will hopefully be through the Fantastic Four films later, just some of them, and then build into it, and then branch out and make their own film or series or whatever else it is, with probably a whole new cast, I'm guessing. But so, do I recommend this? Yeah. If you want to make sure that you've seen every single Marvel show and movie possible, it's required. I have to admit, I have not seen Cloak and Dagger. I watched this because I wanted to see every single Marvel thing. Cloak and Dagger still is on the list. I've seen all of Runaways. I've seen all the Netflix stuff. Seen all of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So I've failed in the sense of Cloak and Dagger, and I thought for sure it would be on here at some point, but it's not. And it should be, because it was on Freeform, and that's Disney as well. ABC, Disney. So, Inhumans, you don't need to see it at all. If you need a frame of reference for Black Bolt, when you see Doctor Strange, yeah, you can get an idea what he's all about. You get to see a little bit more backstory on who he is. He's not just a guy who just blew up his own head, basically, in Doctor Strange, with his own voice. So, yeah, it might give him a little bit more pathos. And by the way, yeah, there's a number of lost actors. Henry Ian Cusick is in this at some point. But yeah, I've talked way too much about one episode of a TV show that you're probably never going to watch. And you don't need to watch, but again, it might be entertaining, and I think by the time you do get invested in them, it's going to be over. So, that's kind of sad. But, yeah. And the thing is, there's no reason to revisit it, because once they brought all the TV stuff in, cut off the people who were handling that stuff before, and brought all the MCU stuff in underneath Kevin Feige, well, everything's kind of getting reimagined in a sense. And if these guys ever do hit the screen again in a way beyond a cameo in Doctor Strange, well, it'll be a proper introduction. And it'll only be probably after the X-Men are established in the MCU proper. They're teasing us like crazy, but the X-Men were the template for all of these types of family things. Because, I mean, yeah, sure, the Avengers existed. Fantastic Four, of course, 1961, is the original family of superheroes who have problems and they don't get along, and there's all sorts of strife. But and Avengers didn't get along either. They're always bickering and stuff like that. The X-Men, of course, but beyond being a bickering found family, they are also representatives of something much bigger, whether it's equal rights and just you can apply it to the struggles of racism and homophobia and everything else. It's just, there's so many allegories and metaphors and everything. Okay, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a guy revving his engine outside. That's great. So anyway, stop it. Nobody cares. You are not cool. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, if you gotta see it, if you gotta check it off the list, go for it. But if not, you don't need to see it to understand the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe outside those few scenes in Doctor Strange. And I would suggest at least watching the first 2 episodes of this. And if you are into it, finish them off. It's just 8 episodes long. Anyway, let's pick tomorrow's episode.
173.
173. I don't have to go very far for that. Come on. Did I plug it in? Come on, load. 173. Come on. This video's long enough. Okay. 173. Documentary. I imagine it's National Geographic. There's a few that fall into this naming. This is Growing Up Animal. And you see that there's Growing Up Animal, and Growing Up Wild. not sure how they connect, but Growing Up Animal makes me think that would be a great documentary on the Muppet animal. That'd be awesome. But no, I have a feeling that's not the case. We're going to be watching Growing Up Animal next on the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you back here tomorrow with that.